Cortisol rhythm. Why you wake up. Tired and feel wide awake at night. Have you ever gone to bed exhausted, only to find yourself staring at the ceiling at midnight? Your body is tired, your eyes are tired, your brain feels tired, and yet sleep refuses to arrive. Then something even stranger happens. The next morning, when the alarm goes off, you feel like you've been hit by a truck. You don't want to get out of bed. You hit snooze. Maybe once, maybe 3 times, maybe 5. You finally drag yourself upright, you drink coffee, then another coffee, and eventually, around 9 or 10 o'clock at night, something remarkable happens. You suddenly feel alive, focused, alert, productive, almost energetic, just in time to ruin your sleep again. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Millions of people live inside this cycle. Exhausted during the day, awake at night, unable to understand why. Many blame willpower, others blame age, some blame stress. But in many cases, the real culprit is something hidden much deeper, your cortisol rhythm. Today we're going to explore one of the most misunderstood hormones in modern health, a hormone that influences your energy, your sleep, your metabolism, your mood, your immune system, and even how fast you age, because cortisol is not the enemy. The problem is when cortisol shows up at the wrong time. Let's start with one of the biggest myths in health. Cortisol has become famous as the stress hormone. And while that's partly true, it's also incredibly misleading. Imagine describing a car engine as simply the noise machine. Technically correct, but completely missing the point. Cortisol is far more than a stress hormone. Cortisol is an energy management hormone, a survival hormone, a timing hormone, a wakefulness hormone. Without cortisol, human life would not be possible. Every morning, before you even open your eyes, your body begins preparing you for the day. Hours before breakfast, hours before coffee, hours before your first meeting, your brain initiates a carefully orchestrated biological process. Cortisol begins rising, heart rate increases, body temperature rises, alertness increases, energy becomes available. The body prepares for action. Scientists call this the cortisol awakening response, and under ideal circumstances. It is one of the most beautiful examples of biological engineering ever discovered. Think of cortisol as sunlight inside the body. In the morning, you want lots of it. At night, you want very little. Simple. But modern life has complicated this ancient rhythm. The human body evolved under natural conditions. Pause, sunrise, sunset, darkness, light, activity, rest. For hundreds of thousands of years, these environmental signals shaped our biology. Then everything changed. Artificial lighting arrived, shift work arrived, smartphones arrived, streaming platforms arrived, 24-hour connectivity arrived. Suddenly, our brains began receiving signals that confused ancient biological systems. The body still expects darkness, but now darkness never arrives. Imagine living inside a casino. No clocks, no windows. Bright lights 24 hours a day. That environment would eventually distort your sense of time. The brain experiences something similar every evening. Blue light from screens suppresses melatonin. The brain interprets bright light as daytime. The biological clock becomes confused, and cortisol timing begins drifting. The result? Sigh. You become sleepy when you should be alert, and alert when you should be sleepy. Exactly the opposite of what biology intended. This brings us to a fascinating concept. Most people focus on cortisol quantity, but timing may be even more important. You can have perfectly normal cortisol levels, yet still feel terrible. Why? Because cortisol is arriving at the wrong time. Imagine receiving breakfast at midnight, lunch at 6 in the morning, dinner at 11 o'clock. The food itself isn't the problem, the timing is. Hormones work exactly the same way. When cortisol peaks at the correct time, you wake feeling refreshed, focused, motivated, ready for the day. When cortisol peaks late, you may feel exhausted in the morning and energized at night. This is what many sleep specialists call a flattened or delayed cortisol rhythm, and it has become remarkably common. One reason this matters is because cortisol influences virtually every major system in the body: energy production, blood sugar regulation, inflammation, immune function, cognitive performance, memory, motivation, mood, recovery, even cardiovascular health. In the right amounts, at the right times. Cortisol is essential. In the wrong amounts or at the wrong times, it can become disruptive. Pause. The key insight is this. The body loves rhythm. The body loves predictability. The body loves timing. And when timing becomes disrupted, everything else becomes more difficult. Now let's talk about the modern epidemic nobody discusses enough. Chronic low-grade stress. Not catastrophic stress, not trauma, not emergencies. I'm talking about ordinary modern life. Unread emails, financial pressure, deadlines, traffic, notifications, arguments, poor sleep, news cycles, social media, constant stimulation. Individually, none of these seem dangerous. Collectively, they create an environment the nervous system struggles to escape. The body remains partially activated, partially vigilant, partially prepared for threat. Even while sitting safely at home, this persistent activation influences cortisol, and eventually, the rhythm begins changing. One of the most fascinating findings from wearable technology is how often people underestimate their own stress. They say, "I'm fine. I'm not stressed. I'm coping." Yet physiological measurements tell a different story. Heart rate variability decreases, recovery scores decline, sleep quality deteriorates, resting heart rate increases. The body reveals a hidden burden. Sometimes the body is more honest than the mind, because physiology cannot lie. The nervous system always tells the truth. This is where sleep enters the story, because sleep and cortisol are inseparable partners. Poor sleep disrupts cortisol. Disrupted cortisol impairs sleep. The relationship becomes a vicious cycle. You sleep poorly. Cortisol becomes dysregulated. The next night becomes more difficult, then harder still, then harder again. Many people spend years trapped inside this cycle without understanding the underlying biology. They believe they have insomnia, sometimes they do, but often they have something slightly different, a disrupted circadian rhythm, a disrupted cortisol rhythm, a body that has forgotten what time it is. Imagine trying to conduct an orchestra where every musician follows a different clock. The violin section starts at 8, the percussion section starts at 10, the brass section starts at midnight. The music becomes chaotic. This is exactly what happens when circadian rhythms become disrupted. The body loses synchronization. Sleep suffers. Recovery suffers, energy suffers, mood suffers, and eventually, health suffers. The good news is that cortisol rhythms are surprisingly responsive. Small changes can produce meaningful results. One of the most powerful interventions costs absolutely nothing. Morning sunlight, not sunlight through a window, actual outdoor light. Within the first hour after waking, the intensity of natural morning light sends a powerful signal to the biological clock. It tells the brain, the day has begun. This strengthens circadian timing, supports healthy cortisol rhythms, improves sleep pressure later in the evening, and helps restore the body's internal schedule. It's one of the simplest interventions in all of health science, and one of the most effective. Movement matters too. Physical activity helps regulate circadian timing, supports metabolic health, improves sleep quality, and enhances stress resilience. But timing matters. Intense exercise late at night can sometimes act like a biological alarm clock. The nervous system becomes activated. Core body temperature rises. Sleep becomes more difficult. Again, timing matters. The body is always paying attention to timing. Then there is perhaps the most overlooked factor of all, consistency. Humans often search for complex solutions, supplements, gadgets, biohacks, exotic protocols. Yet biology repeatedly rewards consistency. Consistent wake times, consistent sleep times, consistent exposure to morning light, consistent routines. The body thrives on rhythm because rhythm creates predictability, and predictability creates stability. As we move deeper into the age of wearable technology and health intelligence, I believe we are witnessing a profound shift. For decades, medicine focused primarily on disease. Today, we are increasingly focused on physiology, recovery, resilience, adaptation, biological timing. The question is no longer simply, am I sick? The better question is, how well is my biology functioning? And cortisol rhythm is one of the most revealing answers. So if you find yourself exhausted every morning, yet strangely alert at night, don't immediately assume something is wrong with you. Consider something different. Perhaps your body is simply operating on a confused schedule. Perhaps your cortisol rhythm has drifted. Perhaps your biology is asking for rhythm, for consistency, for alignment, for darkness when darkness is needed, and light when light is needed. Because ultimately, health is not just chemistry. Health is timing. Health is rhythm. Health is synchronization. And when those rhythms return, energy often returns with them. Sleep improves. Recovery improves. Life improves. I'm Dr. Yende. Thank you for joining me for another episode of OXYZEN Health Intelligence. Remember, your body is always communicating. The question is whether we are listening carefully enough to hear what it is trying to say. I'll see you in the next episode. Have you ever crawled into bed utterly exhausted, every muscle heavy, your eyelids drooping, only to lie there in the dark, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling while sleep stubbornly refuses to arrive? Your body is telling you it needs rest. Your brain agrees. Even your eyes feel ready for sleep. And yet the night stretches on, silent and bright, as if your body and the world around you are out of sync. Then something even stranger happens. Morning finally arrives, the alarm blares, you roll over, willing yourself out of bed, and are met not by renewed energy, but by the sensation of being hit by a truck. Your limbs are leaden, your mind is fogged and sluggish. You hit snooze, maybe once, maybe 3 times, maybe 5, until the morning slips away in a blur of delayed starts. You reach for coffee, then another cup, hoping to brute force your way into wakefulness. Hours pass, tasks are completed on autopilot. Then, as evening settles in, something remarkable occurs. Around 9 or 10 o'clock, when your body should be winding down, you feel suddenly alert, focused, almost electric. Creativity returns, motivation surges, that burst of evening energy then becomes your worst enemy, keeping you up and perpetuating the entire cycle. If that pattern sounds familiar, you are far from alone. Millions of people live inside this exhausting loop, drained during the day, restless at night, wondering what's wrong. Many point the finger at willpower, age, stress, or poor habits, but often the true culprit lies deeper and quieter, a misaligned cortisol rhythm. Cortisol has earned the nickname the stress hormone, and while that label captures part of its role, it's also dangerously incomplete. Imagine describing a car as a noise machine. True, a car makes noise, but that description misses everything essential about its purpose. Cortisol is not just about stress. Cortisol is an energy management hormone, a survival hormone, a timing hormone, a wakefulness hormone. It helps orchestrate how your body uses energy, responds to the demands of the day, and transitions between states of activity and rest. Without it, complex human life would be impossible. Every morning, often before your eyes are open, your brain begins a carefully timed symphony of changes. Long before you pour your first coffee, long before breakfast, and hours before your first meeting, the cortisol awakening response quietly ramps up. Cortisol levels rise, heart rate edges upward, body temperature subtly increases, alertness arrives. The body is preparing, stocking fuel, priming muscles and mind for the day ahead. When this timing is precise, it's one of nature's most elegant mechanisms. Think of cortisol as internal sunlight. In the morning, you want plenty of it. At night, you want very little. This simple ebb and flow, bright in the morning, dim at night, helps align your physiology with the world around you. But modern life has blurred those signals. Our ancestors developed this system under a cycle of sunrise and sunset, of predictable light and dark. Today, artificial light, shift work, smartphones, streaming services, and constant connectivity have altered the environment our bodies depend upon to know what time it is. The biological clock, which evolved to follow natural rhythms, now receives conflicting cues. Bright screens and late-night light tell the brain, falsely, that the day continues, delaying melatonin, suppressing sleep pressure, and nudging cortisol to stay elevated when it should be falling. This is crucial because most conversations about cortisol focus on how much cortisol you have. But timing, when cortisol rises and falls, can be even more important. You can have perfectly normal total cortisol levels and still feel terrible if that cortisol is peaking at the wrong times. Picture someone serving breakfast at midnight, lunch at dawn, and dinner at 11 at night. The food itself isn't the issue, the timing is. Hormones operate the same way. When cortisol peaks at the right moment, you wake refreshed, attentive, and ready. When it peaks late, mornings feel like a fog and nights feel like a second wind. Sleep specialists often describe these patterns as a flattened or delayed cortisol rhythm, and it has become surprisingly common. Why should we care? Because cortisol touches nearly every major system in your body. It helps regulate energy production and blood sugar, modulates inflammation, shapes immune responses, influences memory and cognition, affects motivation and mood, and even plays a role in recovery after illness or exercise. In the right measure and at the right moment, cortisol supports health. At the wrong moment or in the wrong pattern, it can disrupt sleep, spike blood sugar at inappropriate times, and accelerate wear and tear on the body. Our modern world also produces a relentless, low-level form of stress that's easy to dismiss. Unread emails, mounting bills, looming deadlines, stop-and-go traffic, persistent notifications, strained relationships, poor sleep, and the constant churn of the news and social media. Individually, these stressors feel manageable. Together, they produce a chronic state of partial activation. Your nervous system stays on alert, just enough to keep you reactive and fragmented. Over time, this persistent activation shifts cortisol rhythm. Small daily pressures accumulate into a physiological burden you may not consciously feel. Wearable technology has exposed this truth. People often report feeling fine, while their physiology, measures like heart rate variability, recovery scores, resting heart rate, and sleep quality, reveals ongoing strain. The body is often more honest than the mind. Sleep and cortisol are intimately connected. Poor sleep disrupts cortisol patterns. Dysregulated cortisol makes sleep worse. It's a vicious, self-reinforcing cycle. Many people assume they have insomnia when the real issue is a misaligned circadian clock or a delayed cortisol rhythm. Their bodies have simply forgotten what time it is, and that confusion ripples through every system. Imagine conducting an orchestra where each section follows a different time signature. The result is noise, not music. That's what happens when your internal systems lose synchronization. Mood, energy, recovery, and health all suffer. The encouraging news is that cortisol rhythms are remarkably responsive. Small, consistent changes can yield meaningful improvements. One of the most powerful and cost-free interventions is also one of the simplest. Get morning sunlight, real outdoor light, within the first hour after waking. Natural light is an intense, unambiguous cue for the brain. Daytime has begun. That signal helps reset the biological clock, supports a healthy cortisol surge in the morning, increases sleep pressure at night, and strengthens overall circadian timing. Movement matters too. Regular physical activity supports metabolic health, improves sleep quality, and enhances stress resilience. But timing matters here as well. Vigorous, late-night exercise can act like a biological alarm clock, elevating core temperature and activating the nervous system when you're trying to wind down. Gentle movement in the evening and more intense activity earlier in the day often yield better sleep outcomes. And perhaps the single most underestimated tool is consistency. We chase complex gadgets, supplements, and trendy hacks, but biology often rewards the mundane. Consistent wake times, consistent bedtimes, regular exposure to morning light, and stable routines. Rhythm creates predictability. Predictability creates stability. Stability, in turn, allows the nervous system to relax and recover. We're at an inflection point where wearable technology and health intelligence are changing the conversation. Medicine used to focus primarily on treating disease. Now we're paying attention to physiology. How well the body functions, how resilient it is, and how well its timing systems are synchronized. The better question isn't just, am I sick, but how well is my biology functioning? Cortisol rhythm is one of the clearest measures of that functioning. So if you wake every morning feeling drained and then find yourself inexplicably alert at night, don't assume it's a personal failure. Your body may simply be operating on a confused schedule. Its cortisol rhythm may have drifted. Your biology might be asking, quietly and persistently, for rhythm. For morning light at the right time, for darkness when it matters, for movement and rest that follow predictable patterns. Restore those rhythms, and many of life's bluntest challenges, low energy, poor sleep, foggy thinking, often begin to resolve. Health is not just chemistry, it's timing, it's rhythm, it's synchronization. When those things come back into alignment, energy returns, sleep improves, recovery deepens, and life feels better. I'm Dr. Yende. Thank you for joining me for another episode of OXYZEN Health Intelligence. Your body is always communicating. Our job is to listen closely enough to understand what it's trying to tell us. I'll see you in the next episode.